intro where I'm going to make some jokes. This is very serious affair today. So needless to say, the news of the day is the attempted shooting of Donald Trump. Today, we have a very special show of Ken's Corner. I not only have Ken Smith with me. How you doing, Ken?
How you doing, Jay? Good to see you, bud.
I'm back from the Orient.
Absolutely.
I also have with us tonight on a very special night, Marco Quintana.
Jay, good evening. Good to be with you under different circumstances, I would have hoped, but it is what it is. We got to pray for our nation, so glad to be here.
Excellent. And of course, joining us for the first time on Ken's Corner, we have Jacob Prasch.
I like Ken's Corner, but I generally don't want to come on it because I don't want it to be focused on Jacob. I like to have Moriel feature other speakers, other preachers, other authors. So I have avoided Ken's Corner until now. Not because I don't like you. I like you very much. But with today's events, I'm making an exception, and I've showed up.
Amen.
Thank you, Jacob. We really appreciate it. And yes, we're going to dive right into the first topic. Donald Trump shot at a rally in Pennsylvania. The news coming in on Twitter is a complete tornado. Lots of facts coming out from various sources, but to make sense of it is not really even possible at this point. But what I would like to ask the panel that we have assembled here tonight is, where do we go forward? What does the election look like? What does the nomination Monday look like at the RNC convention? Let me start with Marco and we'll move our way to the left.
Yeah, it could not have been. It's the worst of times, and I can't even say it's the best of times, to quote from the famous book by Charles Dickens. But it is to say that the nation is in a very precarious situation. I mean, we were talking last night, I guess yesterday, here on Catching Up. Last night for everybody else, it was afternoon here on the West Coast. And we were referring to the fact that these things are gaining momentum and speed, and we're heading toward basically a scenario where something's got to give. And many things that we've described on Catching Up, we're to the point where what does the deep state, what does the other, the powers that be have in mind? They tried to ruin Trump. They tried to do everything they could to put him in prison, charge him. You name it, they did it. He's got he's the 5 different cases that they've had against him. The one in New York, obviously the one where they charged him with the ridiculous, not even a misdemeanor, but a ridiculous charge. And now the only thing that was left, and we talked about this before, was they would try to kill him. And I have no doubt, make no mistake about it in my mind, this was an assassination attempt. I don't care what the headlines say. I don't care what the DNC says. It doesn't matter what the left says. This was definitely an assassination attempt. And so we are in a very precarious situation as a nation. As Christians, we have to pray. We have to realize that what's in the balance is, of course, the direction of where our nation is going to go. We need to ask for God's hand to really intervene. Because as people today were more concerned about Dr. Ruth being dead, and the other guy that died, I forget. Richard Simmons died.
And Richard Simmons,
yeah. And no. I mean, the headlines were basically saying, loud bangs at Trump's rally, whisked away, security, situation, a bad security situation. And none of them were really willing to say what most Americans that saw this and were aware of it was clearly an assassination. So where do we go from here? It's going to be massive in terms of, I believe, support for Trump. I think the pictures paint 1,000 words of what you've seen him with the flag and with the blood. But I don't think the deep state's done. And I think we've generally just begun a lot earlier than I would have suspected. I really thought maybe August, September, October, heading into November, we would see a lot of things. September surprise, October surprise. I didn't consider July surprise because I thought it was people were still in summertime and enjoying their vacations and things like that. But I think we're in the beginning of that's a beginning of something that it's very nefarious and very evil. in our nation. And we need to pray, whether people like politics or not. It is a spiritual battle. And 1 inch away from having something that tonight would have been a much different conversation, and our nation would have been in a lot worse situation. So God's hand is in it. God could have allowed it. God could have allowed the situation to be an assassination, but he didn't, and he intervened. I believe God's hand is intervening by the prayers of many Christians to avoid something that would have been much more horrible tonight. Riots and retaliations and all kinds of things. But we'll talk about that. But Jay, that's what I think it's coming.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you for that insight. Jacob, can you tell us what your thoughts were? I mean, this harkens back to when Kennedy was assassinated or when Reagan was attacked.
Yeah. Well, I have 4 points. I'll keep them as brief as possible. The first 2 basically echo the remarks by Marco. I agree that this was certainly God's hand. Although I am very, very sorry for the family who lost a loved one, and I pray for them, and I also pray for the recovery of the other 2 people, spectators, innocent people who were wounded. May the Lord have mercy on them, and may they recover, and may the Lord's solace and encouragement come to the mourning family that's in mourning who was killed by this deranged person. That's my first impression, but no doubt God protected Donald Trump. It was the hand of God that protected him. Secondly, I agree with Marco that this is going to galvanize his support base. It is going to make it more difficult, at least to a degree, for the left to continue their diatribes against him, not necessarily with the same ferocity and intensity, but certainly they're going to have to measure their words more carefully in the way they express things in terms of comparing him to Hitler and a threat to democracy, things that will incite people to kill him, thinking that they're protecting America from a Hitler or a Stalin. I do think that it's going to blow up in the face of the Democratic Party. It'll work to Donald Trump's political and electoral advantage. And again, just the images of him raising his fist defiantly and saying, "Fight on," and or covered with blood. I think those are politically emotive images. The other 2 points. One, this stinks of the deep state. The question is, was this a deep state hit, or was it something that the deep state hoped would happen? We know Dan Bongino was a former Secret Service agent, reported that the request by the Trump campaign team to have increased Secret Service protection were denied by the director of the Secret Service. Now, was he acting on his own behest? Because we know that the Secret Service, like the FBI, is filled with DEI and all this other kind of nonsense, as opposed to doing their job. Or was he ordered to do this by Mayorkas, by Biden, or their surrogates? They didn't want to protect Robert Kennedy. I'm not saying they want to kill Robert Kennedy, but they wouldn't mind if somebody else did. To deny Robert Kennedy, whose father was assassinated while running for president, and whose uncle was JFK, and whose family is iconic in the Democratic Party, to deny Secret Service protection just shows you the corruption of the Biden administration, of the Joe Biden machine, of the Democratic Party. It shows you how corrupt they are, that they would deny RFK's son Secret Service protection, despite the iconic place his family occupies in the history of the Democratic Party, and despite the fact that his father was killed while running for president and his uncle was JFK, who was killed. It just shows you how corrupt and treacherous they are. All they care about is power. That is their only loyalty to their own interests. They did the same with Trump. Now, there's no doubt as to the personal courage and to the professionalism of the Secret Service agents who both shielded Donald Trump and ushered him out of there, protecting him. They were probably wearing bulletproof clothes and bulletproof vests underneath their suits, but their professionalism and personal courage is without question. Also, the counter sniper team who shot the assailant, their professionalism and dedication is without question. What is in question is the leadership of the Secret Service. How could somebody with a semi-automatic weapon get that close on a rooftop to 300 yards of a target, of someone running for president? How did that happen? Is this a deep state hit? Or is it just like Robert Kennedy? We don't care if it happens. We're just gonna make it easy for somebody to do it. We're not gonna do it ourselves, but make it easy. So either it was a deep state hit, and it wouldn't be the first time, in my opinion, or it was something that they just hoped would happen and did nothing about it, which is to no way bring into question the integrity or the bravery or professionalism of the agents involved, both the counter sniper team and the agents who ushered Mr. Trump out of there. That's my first question. Deep state is guilty. The question is to what degree. The other thing is the incitement. If you look at Biden's speech yesterday, the kind of speech he gave, comparing Donald Trump to Hitler, based on a litany of lies. We know that Donald Trump wanted a deployment of the National Guard on January 6th, and Nancy Pelosi refused it. We know he tried to prevent what happened on January 6th, and yet they say he tried to stage an uprising, a complete lie, arresting Americans and holding them in jail without bail. The complete and utter corruption. Now, somebody who should have been locked up was Kamala Harris. After a police precinct was burned down, she said this is going to continue and it should continue. Why wasn't she locked up like the animal she is? Why was Kamala Harris not put in prison in the George Floyd riots when a police station was burned down? And her remarks, she actually did incite violence. Why was she not held accountable? That is my question. This is the corruption that we're looking at, this kind of incitement. He's a threat to democracy, a threat to democracy, a threat to democracy. That's what they're telling people. You get a fringe person of low intelligence who will think they're actually defending the national interest and defending freedom and democracy by shooting Donald Trump because they're told he's a Hitler and they believed it. Well, let's look at the real enemies of democracy, the real, true opponents of democracy. The opponents of democracy were not Donald Trump. The opponents of democracy are the party of slavery, Jim Crow, and the Klan. It was that party, the Democratic Party that is non-democratic, the anti-democracy Democrat Party, that pushed Biden into position to be the candidate to run against Trump in order to nullify and circumvent the popular will of their own party voters, using their 100 unelected superdelegates representing the interest of the party, apparatchik, and establishment. I don't like Bernie Sanders, but he should have been the candidate, not Biden. They acted anti-democratic. Now they're trying to get rid of Biden. I have no respect for that senile corruptocrat whatsoever. I wish him nothing but bad. My only fear is I don't want Kamala Harris to take his place even for one day. However, he has 1,900 plus delegates elected democratically in the primary elections. They are trying to, again, circumvent and nullify the democratically expressed will of the Democrat Party voters. The establishment acting against the will, circumventing the will, nullifying the politically and electorally expressed will in the primaries of their own voters. That is an anti-democracy party. How could it not be? This is the party that has made war against the First Amendment, sending the deep state to collaborate actively and active cooperation with Silicon Valley and social media to prevent the free presentation of information and news in order to bias an election. Utter corruption by the deep state controlled by the Democratic Party establishment and elite. A forged dossier paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign, for which neither she nor Podesta were arrested and indicted. In addition to her email violations that Trump was arrested and indicted for, even though he was the president and said he declassified them, she didn't. They didn't hold either Biden or Hillary Clinton to the same standard, selective enforcement. Not to mention the fact that Donald Trump, as president, did have a right to declassify. Be that as it may, a forged dossier paid for. The deep state, the FBI knowing it and using it to get four Pfizer warrants. The same as they lied and say that he tried to stage an insurrection on January 6th. They lied for 2.5 to 3 years, as if it was an absolute fact that there was Russian collusion and he was not a legitimate president. And then complain when he questions the election of Biden as being legitimate, even though there was only 34,000 votes that made a difference in 3 states where there was surreptitious vote tabulations. Unbelievable hypocrisy, unbelievable double standards. This is the party that went to war against the First Amendment. This is the party that is at war with the Second Amendment. This, again, is the party that weaponized the judiciary for political purposes, bringing almost clam-baked charges, absurd minor misdemeanor charges with the statute of limitations virtually expired, and using that as a basis to bring 7 or 8 felony charges by a corrupt district attorney who lets violent criminals out of prison to walk the streets to commit crime again. I speak of Bragg. Utter corruption. A judge whose daughter is a Biden fundraiser and an anti-Trump activist. The judge was not recused. A corrupt kangaroo court. A corrupt judiciary. Who corrupted the judiciary? The anti-democracy Democratic Party, the party of Jim Crow, the party of slavery, the party of the Klan. They are the real enemies of democracy. And they have done everything they can to incite hatred against Donald Trump and his supporters by lying. Not only lying, but bringing false accusations of the very things that they have done themselves and getting away with it. Well, thank God there is a God in heaven.
Amen.
Biden better watch his own back. If they can do it to Kennedy, if they can do it to Donald Trump, they can do it to Sleazy Joe if they want to get rid of him. It makes sense to me that the deep state would try to take out Donald Trump, problem solved, instead of having to take out Sleazy Joe to keep Donald Trump from being reelected. Those are my views. We can only thank the Almighty. America does not deserve God's grace. America, like the rest of the Western world, deserves God's judgment. There must be a remnant of praying Christians that he's still showing the United States a measure of mercy despite itself. Let us be grateful to him above all. And may he raise his hand against the powers that be. I agree with Governor Huckabee. These things are not simply political battles. They are spiritual battles. They're Book of Daniel type conflicts. Those are my 4 comments.
Amen. Thank you, Jacob. Ken, I wanted to ask you, real quickly, is this an event that we'll never really know the answer to the story? Is this like a Kennedy thing that's going to be sealed away for the rest of time? We'll never actually know any of what the government is going to uncover in the next, say, weeks or months?
Well, you don't fear the FBI has assumed control of this investigation. So, but it's the same FBI that had shoot to kill protocols when they invaded Trump's home.
Yeah.
And planted evidence to me. Yeah.
That's
The,
right.
the FBI investigating an attempted presidential assassination is like having the mafia investigating private garbage haulers in New York City.
Exactly. But I'm looking at the news and I'm just looking at the headlines and one of the headlines: Trump removed from stage by Secret Service after loud noises startles former president, and that was USA Today. And then CNN Politics had Secret Service rushes Trump off stage after he falls at rally. I mean, it's beyond crazy. And Dr. Simone Gold, remember her from the COVID stuff? She was filming at downtown
Times Square. Yeah, Times Square.
Yeah, Times Square. Oh, do you see that? And she's filming. It's a minute of her just going back and forth. This is the top leader. I don't care if you like him or if you don't like him. This is the leader of the Republican Party.
He's the top candidate for the whole. He's leading candidate of everything.
They had UFC on. They had all this other news on, and it was crazy. She's like just going from all the. She was in some mall that had TVs and all 8, 9, 10 TVs in there, and then she poked the phone outside. And even the big billboards outside were like ads for Calvin Klein and other things. It's beyond, it's loony bin. So I don't know if I answered your question.
That's all right. It really does say something when there's not a moment of silence. There's not a call for any type of somber mood. I mean, even when you had Julius Caesar assassinated, supposedly you had Anthony give a speech, and it was a speech, a somber moment for a grieving nation. And, Marco, did you have a chance to listen to Biden's speech shortly after the assassination attempt?
Yes. It took a long time. Usually, under normal sane society, you would have had a president come out 10 minutes later after it happened and just at least, let the nation know this cannot be tolerated. Violence like this against an opponent, even if it's my opponent, whatever could be said, but mourn the fact that there's violence in our country and call it out. Not only did they have to release some kind of tweet or some kind of statement before that, it was put on Twitter, not by Biden, of course, but probably somebody wrote it for him, got him out of bed, woke him up from his nap before his bedtime, and then they trot him out there, and it is the most ridiculous thing that it should not have been like this, and he didn't have to have this violence occur in his rallies. You got to read between the lines. It was simple to say he is blaming Trump for the violence that's there because he's responsible for all the violence that's been happening. I mean, they've been blaming him from the beginning. So this is that was his mode of attack on what should have been a very straightforward, we're mourning for the fact that this was an attempt on the candidate for the Republican Party, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't have to say much, but the fact that he had to say what he had to say tells you a lot about it. I mean, 5 days earlier, on a call with the donors, a lot of donors for the Democratic Party, Biden said it's time to put Trump on our bullseye. It's time to put Trump on our bullseye. That was 5 days earlier.
Yep.
We don't have to be diplomatic about it. I don't really care what the left thinks and what the deep state thinks or anything like that, or even what the rhinos think. This was an assassination attempt. Make no mistake about it. I don't even know if other shots hit Trump. There was quite a bit of shots. We only know about the one that hit, grazed his ear and caused the blood. But did he get hit somewhere else? We don't know. Maybe it hasn't been released yet. I mean, he's 78 years old. That kind of shooting, that kind of stress, all kinds of problems can happen. And so did he get hit somewhere else? What happened afterwards? We know he's fine. At least that's what the Secret Service says. But part of it is also like, what's up with the Secret Service? What's up with the You know,
Mhm.
this is the biggest breach of protocol. And Ken, you can explain this better than anybody that I know since the JFK situation. I mean, how can 400 feet, 125 meters, how can somebody get this close? Even if you didn't have all the personnel, you still have to. The perimeter is much wider than 400 feet. Nobody gets even close to that. I mean, a friend of mine was here in the local city when George Bush came into our local city years ago. I mean, the Secret Service here was here for like 4 weeks before the event even happened.
Yep.
And we secure all kinds of. How can lots of questions? And I'm not here to answer all of them. But the reality of it is, it's there's a rat, there's a big one, and I do think whatever Biden said is absolutely horrible, and is horrid, and it should be a shame. But they don't have no shame anymore, so it doesn't really matter what they think or what they say. So we're in a very precarious situation. To Jacob's point, it is very spiritual. We've been saying that and catching up. Ken's been saying that. Ken's point is a very spiritual battle. And spiritual battles require spiritual weapons, and we have to pray and fast for our nation and continue to be gospel preaching and making disciples, because that's really the only way the nation's ever going to turn. It's not through political means of any sort. As you can see, political means lead to violence. Political means to all this stuff. And just like France, we just had riots and continue riots. I think we're on the cusp of that. Excuse me, here in the United States. Back to you, Jay.
Just to you, Jacob, can you speak a little bit more of how you see this spiritual battle playing out? You mentioned that there are probably, with what you're seeing as far as the Lord's grace, there must be some amount of Christians still praying in this country. Do you think we are over the precipice of God withholding the judgment that is definitely is deserved by the society that currently is?
I believe that, but I do not believe it is limited to the United States. I believe that is true of the Western world collectively. It's not just America, it's the Western world. Europe is at least as bad and in some ways worse. So my answer would be both yes and no. I think we crossed the Rubicon. I think that there's no way back. I think that judgment must come. Since 1983, I believed that it's like the revival of Josiah. Even if a revival comes, and there's no indication one is coming, but even if one did come, it would be like Josiah. It would only delay the inevitable. Because of the sins of Manasseh, God's judgment had to come. The Babylonian captivity had to happen. Well, I believe the Western world has crossed the Rubicon. I believe judgment can come, even if there is a revival, and there's no indication of revival in the Western church at the moment. None. On the contrary, they're doing things that prevent revival. The New Apostolic Reformation, the ecumenical movement, etc. There'll be no revival in the present state of affairs. But even if there was, it would only delay the inevitable. Now, what I would also say, though, is this. I will bless them that bless thee and curse them that curse thee. Donald Trump has been the best friend Israel has ever had, while Biden and Obama have been the enemies of Israel, and they are enemies of Israel. Donald Trump has been the best friend. He's also stood up and spoken up for the rights of persecuted Christians in certain countries. He is enjoying the benefits and protection of Genesis 12, 1-3. I have no doubt that is one of the reasons, certainly a main reason for God's grace. I'm not saying that there are not people praying and fasting for Donald Trump and for the country. There are. But I do believe Genesis 12, verse 3 is a factor in the equation. I have no doubt.
Thank you, Jacob. Ken, let me ask you really quickly. We were discussing before the show started, if this were the deep state, if this was a machination of the deep state, do you think they were trying to possibly send a message to Trump that he's maybe shaking the root of the tree a little bit too hard?
I don't know, because I think it was more spiritual covering over him for whatever reason. That's God's initiative to do. And because he turned his head if he had his head just turned the way it was a second, that one shot that hit his ear would have hit him in the temple.
Yeah.
It would have just, and he just turned his head and that's why I just think that, God's hands on him still, and even though we disagree with a lot of things that he does, he's still pro-Israel. I think, I don't want to count him out, but I just hope they don't, if he keeps going to November, I just want to congratulate him on his impending victory because of this. It's crazy. It's nuts.
Thank you. Marco, I'm going to do a follow-up question with you. Speaking of the nature of what's going on, the spiritual warfare that's coming against this man, do you think this is a moment that God might use to finally get him to admit that he's a sinful man? As he famously said in his first, first 4 years of presidency, he says he didn't sin. Do you think this might open his mind to a God that is protecting him, shielding him, preparing him? And, will that change some of the things that we've seen that we as Christians have not liked about Donald Trump?
I really hope it does, Jay. Many times, just on a natural level, when people face stress, when people face chaos, when people face a loss of something, or even just a situation where you lose your job, financial situation, health crisis, or something, people tend to turn to the Lord and turn to prayer and whatever spirituality they had growing up. That seems to be the case, especially with men. That's what it requires many times for them to turn to the Lord. It certainly is a testimony of a lot of men, and certainly Donald Trump has been in our prayers and the prayers of many people. First time when he became a president, we had to pray for those who are in leadership and those who are kings and magistrates. Paul tells us that in 1 Timothy. And so there was that spiritual, you would say, backing or covering because of the prayers of many saints. Now, he surrounded himself with the very ungodly people, false prophets, false teachers of all sorts, even the worst kinds of Apostolic Reformation. I mean, it was like the pit of hell surrounded him, and not knowing, and as an unsafe person, he just really thought they were just normal Christians. I guess we would call it. Yeah. And the people that should have known better, like Mike Pence and other people that were more evangelical, as he said, didn't think nothing of it, didn't even address the issue, which what happened to Judas Pence. But then this, it began to change. Trump began to change his rhetoric, not against Israel, not against the Jews, and not necessarily against Christians per se, but just on moral issues, on abortion, homosexuality, and which he always was, sort of open to it, but he became more and more open to that, to the reality of celebrating, LGBTQ activities and all that. So I do hope, Jay, and it really is my prayer, and I'm being as straightforward and honest. I really do pray that this crisis would see the hand of the Lord. I mean, it's a hair's breadth. I sent you the picture of how
very powerful picture
it was. From having a whole different conversation today, Jay, where we would actually be mourning the loss of a former president, and mourning the fact that the nation, just like what happened with JFK, just like what happened to Bobby Kennedy, we would be in a shock, but also because of the violence that we have experienced over the past 4 years, a summer of love in 2020, and all these Antifa and leftist, Marxist, pro-Islam, pro-Hamas, against Jews, we would have seen something to that degree, as in Paris, where the left, when they won, they riot; when they lose, they riot. Here, you would have had just insane amount of people that are insane, would have gone and celebrated the fact that he was assassinated, and then there would have been his supporters retaliating, perhaps to a certain extent, and it would have been a mess. And I think if there are any believers around him, Secret Service, advisors that know Jesus, this is a time that we have to pray.
Yeah.
Just like Daniel was there with Nebuchadnezzar, an influence, and there was that influence there over Nebuchadnezzar. We do need to pray for that, and we know the story of Daniel about Nebuchadnezzar. So please, if anybody watching, later on, they have to pray and fast for the nation. It's a critical. I don't know how to explain it even more, and words fail me to describe how precarious it is, and how much of prayer and intercession. 1 Timothy chapter 1 tells us, what to do and how to pray for leaders. So this is a time to do it, because we are on the cusp of something that we've never had in our nation before. And just like we watched the videos about France and the UK and what's especially France with the riots, but what turned out in the elections in the UK and the things that are going on there spiritually with Islam. Man, it's something of an onslaught that is coming. And I agree with Jacob. It's worldwide. And that if we had Davey here, he would tell us more about Australia and New Zealand, what's going on there in that part of the world. So yes, I do pray, Jay, that will change his mind and he would repent and trust and believe in Jesus, that it's the God of Israel who saved his life.
Also, that the Lord would protect him from the demons who surrounded him.
Yes,
he reflected the last time Satan opened a hatch to hell.
How did they all crawled out?
Out of that hatch, a demon came out, and the name of the demon is Paula White.
Yeah.
These demonized false teachers and false prophets, professing to be believers, but they're heretics and con artists and personally immoral. And Paula White was, of course, his chief counselor. A wicked woman. She went walking down the street like a $2 whore on the Via Venuto in Rome with Benny Hinn when he was married. I mean, this is the one with no scruples and no morals whatsoever. This is just, holding hands with a married man, and both of them supposedly in ministry. She was Satan's little whore, and that was Donald Trump's advisor. He's got to get better advice. He's got to begin listening to at least somebody like Governor Huckabee or somebody.
Yes, amen.
Franklin Graham. Look, they may not be perfect, but there'd be a big improvement over a little satanic whore of Satan.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Question to you, Ken. Do you foresee, because right now I would say, out of my speculation, my prognostication, if we were to have the election today, Donald Trump wins in a landslide.
Absolutely.
That being said, considering the lengths, now let's take the fact that the assassin really is just a crazy left-wing Antifa guy, like some people are reporting. What is the reaction, considering what Marco was talking about, the summer of love, if he is reelected? Are we going to see worse riots, in your opinion?
Well, I was watching this guy going off on all the press, and they actually had a cop come up, and this is from the right side. This is the right people are supposed to be a little more subdued, and he was yelling at the press that was covering the trial. He said, "It is your fault. This is your fault. This is your fault." And I just was like, wow. And so I know that right now, he's ahead in Pennsylvania, 48% to 44%. And I think it's going to increase. I think it's going to go up. And like I said earlier, if he makes it to November, I mean, it's going to be, I think he wins, and I don't know what happens. I know that this is an event that has caused, that one, and we can't play that one girl that was yelling.
No, we couldn't, but
what I'm saying? Like,
all she was doing was praying that the guy missed. She was mad.
Yeah,
that the man missed Donald Trump.
Yeah. Imagine 50% of the nation that thinks like that. Yeah. And then 50% of the nation that thinks like that guy that was pointing at the report. This was an older gentleman. He he didn't look anything like someone who would stand up. And he was just like, the cops had to come and take him away. And it was just kind of like those little pinpoints that I noticed that are, and that young girl, I don't know if she ever posted before on Twitter, but she just ran. She goes, I said, just was an inch. If they missed him by an inch. I mean, it's crazy.
It was like he was demon possessed.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yep. And I see it separating more and more and more. And we've already talked about this. We've already talked about the nation separating itself and maybe, I don't know. I don't know if it goes through another civil war, but maybe just people just seclude and separate themselves. A lot of people are moving out of the cities. My daughter moved out of, California and moved to a really, really conservative area, Fort Worth, Texas, and now that Fort Worth, Texas, that which used to be Dallas, where my cousins used to live, and Dallas Dallas is kind of purplish, Dallas.
Yeah, very much so.
Texas has, yeah.
Yep. So it's crazy to see that over the last 30 years, 40, 50 years, 40 years, So.
Final question for the entire panel, and each of you can tackle it in whatever way you want. But I foresee if Trump wins, the most important thing that can happen is that he needs to have control of the Senate and the Congress.
Yes.
So my question that I would like to pose to each of you, does this event push those important Senate and Congress races? Does it push the needle in any direction? We'll start with Marco.
I do believe that it pushes the needle for sure, Jay. Not only is these important races, in terms of governorship, senatorial, Congress, I think the media is going to be much more tame. But then again, I don't know that. I think it may be even be more, maybe more adverse to the fact that these people are absolute crazy over this. And they may want to tame themselves for a little, but I don't think they can hold themselves to the point where they won't be able to talk about this anymore. They'll do it, and they'll do it even more aggressively. But some of these senatorials and Congress races are going to be very important over the next 3 or 4 months. I think the fact that over the past 3 months, I've seen just the Democratic Party almost imploding on itself. You have people that normally would have been for the unity of the party, no matter how much they hate each other, completely go the other way. And some, like Bernie Sanders and AOC, singing the praises of Biden. And so you have a really big divide. And I think there is a judgment on the Democratic Party that God is allowing a terrible division among them. Yes. Usually they unite over ridiculous, crazy stuff, like when Bernie Sanders decided to opt out and not continue and drop out of the race, so that Hillary with the superdelegates get the candidacy. Usually, even if they hate each other, they unite for this purposes. I've seen it very differently this time, and so I think this is. On the one hand, on the other hand, I don't know if the only thing the good Republican parties, the only thing they can do right is lose elections. So I don't give any prospects that maybe the Republicans will be able to salvage a win here at all. The only thing we can pray is that there's conservative and godly candidates that can win those seats, not the ones that they ran in 2022, but new ones that really love the nation, care for Americans, care for the concerns of American citizens, which is a lot of it is the illegal immigration, open borders, fentanyl, drugs, the violence, and the economy, and the ungodliness in our nation. Those are the things that people are really waking up to, the reality. And those are the kind of senators and congressmen that we need. But are we going to get those? Only the Lord can give us mercy. That's the only thing that can really bring about a change, is God's people repent and come back to their first love, and then God give us the right leadership. But I do think over the next 3 months, it's going to be critical. Those small races, gubernatorials, Senate and Congress, going to be very important. And it may spark some of these Republicans to say, this is a legitimate regime in the White House, and they are going to try to destroy the nation. And if we don't step up, then it's going to be lost. But like I said, I don't have a lot of confidence in men. I don't have a lot of confidence in politicians, especially. But I do have a lot of confidence in Christ and His grace and His mercy. And by His grace and mercy, I would want to think that godly people would pray and fast during this time. And that's been my call to believers in this nation, not only the nation, but also in the UK and other places in Europe and other places where there's believers, because the same thing is happening there too. So I know we're focusing on today in America, but it is it's global. It's global. So anyway, back to you, Jay.
All right. Final thoughts, Jacob. Sum up anything you want to say to the audience.
Well, concerning what Marco said, if I was going to cap it up, even if the needle moves and more Republicans get elected, remember, Donald Trump had a majority, congressional majority during his first term. And what changed? Not much. Let's take a liberal, Nancy Pelosi, as opposed to Senator Murkowski. What is the difference? One's a Democrat, one's a Republican. Okay, Nancy Pelosi is a godless enemy of righteousness. Murkowski is a godless enemy of righteousness, plus a liar on top of it, as a Susan Collins. Okay. What is the difference between Dick Durbin and John Cornyn? Well, Dick Durbin is a godless enemy of righteousness in the Senate. John Cornyn, a Republican, is a godless enemy of righteousness, plus a liar on top of it. Remember, an establishment Republican, a rhino, is nothing in any way different than a Democrat, except that they have the added attribute of being a liar on top of it. George Bush, what's the difference between George Bush and nothing, except that he's a liar on top of it. No difference between George Bush and Al Gore, just he's a liar on top of it. I look at Ronald Reagan, said he was pro-life and he appointed a pro-abortion judge to the Supreme Court. He lied. He was just a liar. That's all he was a liar. Barack Obama, and that was the judge who wrote the decision ordering the 10 Commandments out of the Judicial Building, Sandra Day O'Connor. That was Ronald Reagan. He was just a liar. Same as a Democrat, only a liar on top of it. Barack Obama, Joe Biden funded Iran. Ronald Reagan gave arms to Iran, to the terrorists of Iran. Is Ronald Reagan any better than Barack Obama? No, he's what they are, plus a liar on top of it. There is a liar on top of it. Now, I speak, of course, of the rhinos, of the establishment Republicans, of the Bush machine, of people like Bush and their vassals, Cheney and Cheney's daughter, John Cornyn, Romney, people like this. They're no better than Democrats. They just lie on top of it, pretending to be conservative in order to manipulate naive Christians and naive people into voting for people who are no better than Democrats. The hatred of Ronald Reagan was not only among the Democrats, it was among Republicans, the never-Trumpers. They would much rather have Biden or Obama or anybody other than Donald Trump because they are swamp rats. They are creatures of the swamp of Washington. They want to preserve the swamp. They want to preserve the rat-infested swamp because they're one of the rats. That is their vested interest. They will prefer to have a Democrat than a conservative or a libertarian or an independent like Donald Trump than a non-politician. They hate him as much as the Democrats hate him. Romney, Bush, they're as much enemies of America and the interests of America. We just saw this past week photo-documented proof of Saudi Arabian collaboration with the September 11 terrorists. Saudi Arabians had the Bush administration, the Bush and Cheney in their back pocket. Bush, after September 11th, allowed the express visa programs for Saudi Arabians to get into America for over a year. Even the Europeans banned that. Republicans are no better than Democrats. Just naive Christians, undiscerning Christians, think they are. So even if the needle moves, it won't make a difference. Yes, I like people like Ted Cruz more or less. I like people, like Senator John Kennedy. I like people like that. I like, Jim Jordan. I like people like that. But most Republicans are not like that. Democrat, Republican, what's the difference? A rat is a rat. Does it matter to you what kind of rat it is? It's just a rat. It's a rat that lives in the swamp. And they are as dedicated to the preservation of the swamp as a Democrat is, because just like a Democrat, they're a rat who lives in the swamp. Don't threaten their environment. They need their swamp because they're rats. That's what they are. That's all they are. Christians are just being very, very, very naive.
Thank you, Jacob. Ken, it's your corner, and I'm going to let you sum it up and close us out, my friend.
All right. Well, I agree with Marco and I agree with Jacob 100%. The Democratic Party is imploding on itself. There's a judgment on the Democratic Party, but also the Republican establishment. Republicans, especially, they cannot win. They're disgraceful. And I just pray for the Lord's mercy as he did in Nineveh. That's about where we're at. And I believe it's judgment. I always talk about that. I believe it's supernatural judgment. And godly people need to pray and need to fast. And the West is falling globally. So, and it might be just a time that we just kind of, filter in with everybody else. But I don't know. It's just a time of it's a time of not knowing, but yet so that it's a time where we need to reach out and pray and seek the Lord for his his will and his way. So yeah, that's it.
All right. Well, Marco, Jacob, Ken, thank you so much for joining us for this special edition of Ken's Corner. And we hope to see you soon. Ken and I will be working on the next show. And once again, thank you, gentlemen, for staying up late to do this broadcast.
Glad to be with you, Jaden, and Ken and Jacob. Thank you so much. And God bless you guys.
See you tomorrow, Lord willing.
Amen.